Good afternoon, Buffalo. This is the Reverend Kinzer Pointer. Welcome to Buffalo on Fire, Community in Crisis, conversations with Attorney Anthony L. Pendergrass and the Reverend Kinzer M. Pointer. It's a balmy Buffalo Saturday afternoon.
It is. Good afternoon, Buffalo. Welcome to Buffalo on Fire. Well, Rev, our kids no longer have to go to school. To hell with those little black monkeys. We should just simply send them to school and let them work as janitors.
I think that those were the musings of one Newt Gingrich.
Musings of one. I don't think he was musing there, Rev. I thought he was absolutely serious about our kids needing a work ethic, and I think he went as far to say that our kids lived in a better condition under slavery, under the slave enterprise than they do currently.
See, that's what I meant by musing.
Oh, okay.
You cannot have a serious conversation
okay.
in which you suggest in any way, form, or fashion that someone is better off as a slave than they are as an individual who exercises liberty.
Well, this is the professor.
It has to be.
This is the professor of the. He's the dean, if you will.
He's the dean of destruction.
Of the Republican Party.
He's the dean of destruction.
Saying that our kids black kids lived a better existence under slavery than they do now, with the limited freedom that they enjoy. 837-1112, 837-1112. We are a community show. Come give us your thoughts.
Listen, Newt is no more today than he was in 1994 when he introduced the contract with America.
You mean the contract on America?
No, the contract with America.
Okay.
Because he chose it aptly. He certainly wasn't talking about you and me. He was talking about folk who looked like him, who held on to his values and held on to his ideology. And we know that the contract with America had nothing in it that would encourage you or I to join the ranks of those professors of foolishness that Newt and his friends are.
Well, here's the thing then, that the contract with America was similar to the contract with America back in the 1600s. Might I dare say
it wasn't similar.
The 1500s.
It wasn't similar. It was identical.
Well, and so that, okay, and I'll take the identical.
It was identical.
Of position, right? And so that it was a contract that black folks simply are not signatories to.
That's right, and
that are simply meant to exclude us, preclude us from realizing our true potential.
It's a perpetuation of the same kind of nonsense that's been coming out the mouths of middle-aged white men like Newt Gingrich for the last 5.5 centuries.
But this is not simply middle-aged white men, right? Remember, we were at the National Black. What's the name of the organization? I want to get it right.
You mean the Metropolitan Alliance of Black School Educators?
Metropolitan Alliance of Black School Educators, right? Where white woman stood up, who was a teacher, and she said that we should be directing our kids towards the kinds of jobs that requires them to engage in hard labor, blue-collar labor, right? That blue-collar labor was the only kind of labor. The hell with college, they should be hanging sheetrock and stuff.
Well, Anthony, you and I have had this conversation personally, and I've told you before that white men don't get these ideas in a vacuum. That they originate in a certain place, and that place is they originate with white women. Okay. I mean, come on, let's just be honest about these things. And look.
So Newt's wife is telling him somewhere.
Newt's divorced. Remember, he.
Well, I mean, he's been divorced several times. I think he's remarried again. Now Newt is the guy telling us what our moral imperative ought to be.
Yeah, that's the guy.
Okay, right. I just want to make sure we have the same guy.
It's the same guy.
The same guy telling us what our moral imperative ought to be. The same guy that's telling us that it's all right to say to hell with, the What, almost 90 years of child labor law?
Over 90 years.
Over 90
As a
years.
matter of fact, the National PTA proposed the first child labor laws in 1896.
Okay.
Even before,
So we're a little over.
before National PTA existed, those women who formed National PTA suggested to the then president that he should, adopt child labor laws.
Now, when you say 1896,
1896.
okay, you know.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I think in direct contrast to Plessy versus Ferguson and all of those resulting decisions from Mr. Roger B. Taney's court, there were people who were sensible.
Okay, and by the way, Roger B. Taney was the justice, or was the
Chief
Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court, right? And he is the one that said that
the Taney Doctrine,
that a white man or that a black man has no rights that a white man is bound to respect. Did I get that right?
You got it right.
All right,
and
I think that's a word for word quote. That's not a paraphrase.
I call that the Taney Doctrine.
Okay. And I remember that from being back in school, that a black man has no rights that a white man is bound to respect.
Those right? That is direct.
And so when they were talking about child labor laws, right? They weren't talking about child labor laws, and they weren't talking about a contract that black folks were a signatory to. They were talking about how child labor laws would affect those individuals coming over from Europe.
Well, I'm not in a position to argue who they were talking about. I simply know this. I know this. And
well,
this is a conversation.
But no, I'm not going to let you get away with that.
You're going to have to let me get away with it. You don't have to let me get away with that.
You can't.
Because you haven't even heard what I'm saying.
Can I finish? Can I argue with that?
Can I finish?
Oh, I'm going to let you finish.
I didn't say it. I didn't say I was in a position not to argue with it. I said I'm not in a position to argue that.
Okay.
But I am saying this, that whatever laws that have been proposed in the United States, they've never intended that you and I should exercise any rights under those laws.
You mean laws that's been proposed for protection of people?
They never intended.
Groups.
Well, I mean, those laws that have been designed to be liberating don't apply to you and I. They were never intended that you and I should use those laws to gain the kind of protection and freedoms that they enjoy relatively regularly. So you are not entitled to those protections.
So you are in a position to argue that.
No, I'm in a position to argue this.
Okay.
I'm in a position to argue this. They never surmised that, first of all, your black would learn how to read. Second of all, they were never concerned that once you learned how to read, you would also learn how to reason. And you would use both of those faculties to put yourself squarely in a position to defend yourself. That's the whole issue. And that's the problem. And that's why, you get people like Newt Gingrich, and there is a plethora of such jerks and idiots running around today, and they've all just, excuse me, they've all come out of the closet.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
as a matter of fact, as we used to say, they're coming out of the woodwork.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Because earlier this week, that wonderfully intelligent governor of Florida suggested, in the midst of the horrific hazing circumstances that surround Florida Agricultural and Mechanical University's marching band.
Florida FAMU for you.
FAMU.
Yeah.
For those of us who know FAMU.
FAMU. Yeah.
Around FAMU's marching band, a young man who was a drum major died from hazing a couple weeks ago. There's been a full-blown investigation into the death, the marching band, the university, and the governor of Florida, in his August position as the chief executive officer in the state of Florida, suggested the other day that the board of trustees was incapable of managing this circumstance, and he simply suggested that the current president of the university should be chucked. He should be out the door, fired, thrown out. The students at FAMU went to the governor's mansion. They happened to be in the same town. See, Tallahassee isn't that big. They went to the
Small
governor's
town.
mansion and they protested. He came out to address them, and he began his address with much the same idiocy.
Oh, my
that-
fellow Americans.
No, not that kind of idiocy. But he began his address to the students the same way he addressed the state's black legislators back in May, when he said, like you, I grew up in a public housing project.
And presupposing that the individual.
That's because
who
he wasn't presupposing anything. He simply was being who he is. And who he is a white male who simply operates on stereotypes.
Yeah.
And he just assumed that every one of us who is brown skinned have lived in a public housing project.
Well,
And the students roundly said to him, Mr. Governor, we're not poor.
yeah, and we didn't grow up in a.
And we didn't grow up in a public housing
We grew
project.
up in houses.
And they were offended. And they should have been offended.
As well, they should be.
As were the legislators before them. But Newt Gingrich he's in this instance this week, he's standing on top of the head of Herman Cain,
Okay.
who has since laid down his presidential campaign, and Gingrich has stepped up on top of Cain's head, as he should, and he's now spewing the kind of I hate to say it.
Vile.
Yeah, but it's not simply vile, but it's an intellectual racism that purports that there is a place for a people, whoever they might be. And that kind of thing is not just vile, but it is absolutely dangerous, because it assumes that everybody else is not intellectual.
No, but that's always been the assumption.
I'm not arguing
that everybody else is not intellectual.
I told you it was a problem when you're black learned how to read.
Well, I mean, it was a problem when my black ass. He won't say it, but it was a problem when my black ass first arrived on these shores.
Well, that's right. That's why it was outlawed.
Yes.
That's why teaching you to read was outlawed.
Or teaching you to do
because
anything.
teaching you to read also meant that you would discover in the reciprocal course of things, you would discover what reason was,
Yeah.
and you'd be able to form conclusions.
But see,
you'd be able to think on your own, and you wouldn't need anybody to tell you anything, because you simply could read and come to a conclusion.
Here's what's problematic, right? Because you assume that reading, and I'm assuming the Queen's English and all of that stuff, right? What was the thing that led us to having the ability to reason?
Nope.
I would submit.
That's
to
not
you,
what I'm assuming.
I would submit to you that
That's
we had.
not what I'm assuming.
Well, but I'm going to submit anyway.
I am assuming that the more wide-read you are, the more reasoning you engage in, and the more reasonable you become.
Yeah.
And the more you discover the idiosyncrasies and the hypocrisies that are inherent in a system like the one we live in.
837-1112. 837-1112. We are a community show. Give us a call. Let us hear your views. Well, here's what I'm going to submit to you, right? That we had the ability to reason far before we came to these shores.
Yeah, I didn't say that was my
Right?
position.
I mean,
I simply said that was the position.
That was their position.
That's
Okay.
that was the
Well,
position.
well,
The position
I
was
can accept-
is that
I
you
can
were
accept that.
you were an animal and a brute, and you didn't have any faculties that would have allowed you to get there prior to you learning how to read English. They forgot that you knew how to read whatever languages you were speaking when you came here.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And they forgot that we had the ability to reason in whatever languages we reasoned in.
Well, they forgot as much as they wanted to,
well,
but they had proof of that.
Well, let's say they didn't forget. All right, let's say they adopted for themselves,
Right.
and adapted,
Right.
You know, whatever they wanted to do with regards to you and I.
And that's what they've always done.
And portrayed you and I in the ways in which they
That's
sought
right.
to portray us simply for the
As
purpose of
subhuman, and mongrel.
maintaining their systems
Maintaining
and
a
structures.
system that they had put in place and that they intended to maintain by force.
So and then when we talk about these social contracts and stuff, right? For me, they're illegitimate social contracts.
Of course they are.
Right? Because you and I, why should you and I have to abide by something where we're not signatories.
Well, listen, Anthony. I'd like to pick and choose the ones though I'd like to reject. Because I'm not a signatory to the United States Constitution, but I'll be damned if I'm gonna let anybody take it away from me at this point.
Well, yeah, I mean,
okay.
Well, at least
Again,
those things that are good with the United States Constitution.
That's right. The 14th Amendment.
Well,
due process. Those things. Those things that that matter. That in some latent way protect us from the evil forces that exist in this system we live in.
Well, but the problem that I'm having is that...
we end up having to appeal to higher courts. I'm with you. I understand.
And then the 14th Amendment is turned upside down on its head. I mean,
it is from time to time.
Right? For everything. The other day I was in court and someone, once again, was calling me a racist, a spewer of hate, because I said that the system that I was advocating against was totalitarian, was fascist, was sexist, and was racist. And so whenever we seek to tear down those systems and structures that do nothing more, that does nothing more than to maintain a racial hierarchy in this society, right? The cards get flipped upside down. The card gets flipped on us.
No, Anthony. The wagons get circled. That was what that was.
Oh, that was a circling
that was a circling of the wagons. That was a white male calling other white males to arms to put a stop to the kind of work that you have chosen as part of your avocation.
Yeah.
That's the circling of the wagons. That's what that is. That's deciding to array the whole system against one human being. I mean, we see that again and again and again.
Well, yeah,
particularly when you look like we do.
Now, see, I'm gonna use a term, right? And I'm gonna say all. Right? And I know.
I argue with that.
That you say all means all encompassing.
I'm gonna argue with that,
right?
but go for it.
But all the time, everywhere, every day.
Every day.
Yeah, black folks are confronted with these kinds of systems and structures, right? Whether you want to accept them or not, right?
Right.
I gotta tell you, whenever I'm riding up and down the street and I see the police, right? It's a system and structure, right? That I'm confronted with that may be inimical to my very existence.
Okay.
Right? And so that all day, every day, I'm using that all encompassing word.
Okay.
Right. That black folks are confronted with this, right? And just imagine returning what is new? 80-year-old white guy who reminisce about the olden days, the way things used to be,
right,
when we had those niggers under control, and the way that we had those niggers under control.
And he thought he had it in hand in 1994.
No, but white people are standing up and applauding him, right?
Oh, of course they are.
They are standing up and applauding him about sending those little black niggers back to being janitors and stuff.
That they
can have a work ethic.
Let me pull out again some of that intellectual racism that I talked to you about. At Rutgers University earlier this week.
Okay.
One of the students invited other students to her home for a viewing of Walt Disney's Song of the South. Uncle Remus. Zippity doo-dah, zippity-a. My oh my, what a wonderful day. I mean, and in her email inviting other students to this private viewing in her home of Songs of the South, she invited them to bring the kind of snack items that would be fancied by that kind of jingoism that's portrayed in Song of the South. As a matter of fact, she said if she had enough response, she might even find that she could find a place for a watermelon in her house.
A watermelon in her house, huh?
A watermelon. Not a watermelon.
Well, I got to tell you.
A watermelon.
Rev, I wish I was in right? And I wish he had some chicken and watermelon. Right?
I'm just
Because
saying.
I gotta tell you, I kind of like chicken and watermelon.
Well,
and I think they might go well together.
I think I would have been. But she used the university's email system.
Yeah, and it's asinine.
To propagate a racial stereotype that highlights a kind of step and fetch it sing along Negro that Walt Disney characterized Reconstruction era Negroes as.
Well,
Which couldn't be more.
But everybody did.
Which couldn't be further from truth. I'm not arguing whether everybody did it or not. I'm simply arguing that Walt Disney did it, and did it in a codified manner in Song of the South, and that he filmed this stereotype.
Well, that in at some point early on there was some discussion about someone showing Birth of a Nation as one of the greatest.
D.W. Griffith.
One of the greatest movies and stuff. But here the problem I'm having here, right, is that this kind of attitude is ubiquitous.
Everywhere.
It's everywhere.
And right? I'm telling you
and
that
it's
acceptable
it's
intellectual
accepted.
Ponderings.
Yes.
And
yes.
that's the problem.
That's problematic, right? And it doesn't matter that the public pronouncements that these university administrators and everyone else are making when they allow a culture
to exist
on their campuses,
upon which these kinds of structures are necessarily imposed.
Absolutely,
it cannot be.
Why else would
unmistakable.
Why else would someone think that it was all right, it was acceptable to do something, except for having the imprimatur, explicit or not, of the university?
And she referred to herself as a not racist racist.
Yeah. A not racist racist.
I said, "Wow."
Oh, I'm confused there.
Now, either you're a racist or you're not. But she said, "I'm not a racist racist."
Okay. Well, I guess there's a way in which to justify, and maybe she's not.
Well, yeah, she just simply says she's not a racist, and then engage in racist behavior and activity, which indicates that she is a racist.
Well, maybe.
It's the first honest assessment, personal assessment of someone who was racist and who sought to cover it up by saying, "I'm not a racist." It's the first time that I saw somebody actually be honest.
Well, how about
I'm a not racist racist.
Well, how about it? Is she saying that, you know what, I've been indoctrinated in this course of behavior during the entire course of my life, right? And therefore, it doesn't make me a person who hates someone based on an irrational, immutable characteristic,
right?
Or that my hatred is not irrational based on an immutable characteristic, or my hatred is based on what I've been indoctrinated over a long enough period of time.
I don't know what she said. I'm gonna take the caller. Welcome to Buffalo on Fire.
Good afternoon, Fred and Anthony.
Good afternoon.
I've been listening, but I have to put my 2 cents in.
Go right ahead.
Well, okay. Once you add 3 cents to it, Doc.
I think that black people have to start taking a look at themselves. That we got to make a change. When our kids walk around with their pants hanging off their butts, their hats turned sideways, we can't. That's an image that these white businessmen are allowing our kids to continue, because I believe this style has been going on since the 70s. I met the fat boys on Eastern Airlines airplanes from Puerto Rico, and they were doing that type of song, the rapping song. That was back in the 70s. I mean, we have to educate our kids. They can't walk around like that, because you can't walk into a place and get a job, even though trying to get a decent job, even when you have a suit on, is nearly impossible. But it is totally impossible if you're going to do that.
All right, Doc.
We have to wake up ourselves.
Doc.
If you look in the paper, I believe it was yesterday or the day before, where the teachers in these 3 schools that have low ratings, and these teachers are fighting for their jobs. You know, I didn't read where the reporter where we stood up and said those teachers got to go. How can they stay in a school that is below average?
Well, Doc,
we're sitting back letting that happen.
No, Doc. I don't think we're sitting back, because we've been engaged here in the city of Buffalo.
Oh yes,
right?
we have.
But Doc, I'm gonna take you to task, right? That brilliant sister, India Ari, right?
I'm not my hair.
She wrote a brilliant song, right? And the song simply is "I am not my hair," right?
Not what?
I am not my hair. Right? The way I wear my hair, the way I dress, does not even begin to define who I am and what I am. Right? So
the media uses that.
The media will use anything.
To denigrate us.
Media will use any effort.
You know, this is my opinion.
Okay.
Everybody has their opinion.
You're right, Doc.
I think that you have to be a formidable foe if you're going to fight a fight. And you do that, what needs to be done here is our kids need to be educated. They need to think that they are always in this formidable fight.
Well, yeah, but Doc.
I don't think wearing these sideways hats that I really detest, and pants where I can see your underwear. What's sexy about that?
Well, it doesn't have to be anything sexy about it, right? I mean, you know, we each generation has developed some kind of style, some kind of, I think they call it swagger.
You know what? I'm glad you said that. Okay, look at the miniskirt. Okay, how long did the miniskirt last?
I have no idea, but I can assure. Didn't you have yourself a miniskirt?
These pants hanging off your butt.
Hold on.
It lasted over 20 years.
Did you have yourself a miniskirt?
I sure did.
And they detested when you had yourself a miniskirt during that time, correct?
It lasts long. It lasts maybe a year.
No, I'm not asking, Doc. I'm not asking.
It lasts 20 years.
I'm not asking how long it lasts. I'm saying that there was a critique about the ways in which you chose to dress, about the activities that you engaged in when you were young.
You're missing my point.
I'm not missing the point. I'm not missing the point.
Reiterate it, okay? There are fads where the miniskirt was around, okay? It was around, but it was around for a few years. They didn't. The white society did not perpetuate it because they knew it was unacceptable. They knew that you couldn't wear this miniskirt into an office and get this top-paying
Then
job.
tell me why they do it now.
The media is perpetuating pants. I walked into a store a few years ago. I was shocked. I picked up a pair of shorts, and the crotch was down halfway below the knees. They were actually sewn. The jeans were sewn that way. I couldn't believe it. And those shorts would not have been hanging on that rack if someone wasn't buying them.
All right, 837-1112,
You're right, Doc.
837-1112.
You're right, Doc. But I want us to get back to